Hi, Liz.
Hello.
Welcome to our show.
It's so nice to be with you guys. It's slightly intimidating because you're across the table looking at me, both of you.
When was the last time you had a
We're
job
about to
interview?
go. Do you know, I don't think I've ever had a job interview. Because I've always been kind of freelance, self-employed, self-made. I think I did probably have a job interview. I used to wait tables at the local hotel when I was at college. So I think I must have turned up for an interview for that. But that is going back a long way in time.
I mean, don't worry about us. We're just two idiots.
Yeah,
I know you're not idiots because I've listened to your podcast.
Thank you. You're very kind.
Yeah, I've never had a proper job.
You kind of make it up as you go along. But I think I don't know. I mean, for me, I've just walked through doors as they've opened. And I think that's always been my advice to people as well, is to go for opportunities and just take them and see where they lead you.
I mean, initially, you started off as a writer.
I did, yeah.
And everything's kind of gone full circle in a way,
Yeah.
isn't it? Because now you're back.
Yeah,
writing
back
again.
writing. So I started, I went to a hotel management catering college, same one as Jamie Oliver in London. And that was really because I couldn't think of anything else I'd rather do at the time. And it was a very broad course. It's a great course, actually, because it teaches you everything from a crash course in haute cuisine and food and wine and to the economics of running a hotel. And so there's a lot of, accountancy and marketing and logistics and all that kind of thing. So I really enjoyed that. And when I was at college, I needed to get some cash, basically. So I had really long hair at the time, and I walked into a little hairdressing salon in South Molton Street called Molton Brown, which back then was just a little hairdressing salon. It wasn't this kind of big toiletry brand that it was. And I said, can I come in and help you out? Is there anything that you need? And they said, wow, we love your long hair. Let's take some pictures of you covered in hair curlers. And they were creating these crazy fabric hair curlers called Molton Browners. So I became their Molton Browner girl. And ended up then when I left college, they said, well, what are you going to do now that you've left college? And I said, I'm not really too sure. And they said, well, come and work for us because we're starting to make toiletries. And they were making things like chamomile shampoo in a bucket in the corridor. And it was, Anita Roddick had started with Body Shop, and there were all these sort of natural beauty brands and things starting. And I just thought this is going to be really fun. So I went there and I stayed there for a few years doing all sorts of different things because it was a young company and, anybody, I'm sure there are lots of people listening, working with startups or young companies, you just get thrown in and you do everything. 1 minute you're literally cleaning the loos and the next minute you're stacking the shelves and then you're talking to customers or you're creating something or working on some press. And for me, I guess the moment then when the penny really dropped for me was when I was in the press office covering for the PR who was away and taking phone calls from journalists who were asking me all these questions about, how do you make the chamomile shampoo and, what are the new season's colours and all of this kind of thing. And I just thought, oh, my goodness, I want to be that person at the other end of the phone asking these questions. So I hooked up with some friends who were in the beauty world for magazines and who I'd met through Molton Brown. And I said, look, if ever you hear of any jobs going, will you let me know? Because this whole magazine world is just where I want to be. And sure enough, a job came up on a monthly magazine called Woman's Journal, which doesn't exist anymore, but it was a really nice kind of glossy monthly magazine. And they were looking for a junior. And I went along, and I guess that was a job interview because I didn't feel like it at the time. I went along, I had a cup of tea, and they said, "Right, you'll do." And that's where I started. And I was very lucky. I was mentored. I was given an opportunity to write. Started writing little paragraphs of copy that grew into bigger features, and I just found my slot, found where I really wanted to be.
Did you have writing experience before you went into that? Or was that just something you picked up as you went along?
I think I just picked it up. I've got English O-level back in the days when we did O-levels. But that was it. And I've always loved writing. And I was taught, I was mentored, I was given little bits to write, and my editor would sit down with a sharpened pencil and go through it and go, actually, that's not great, and you need to refine this. And I picked it up quite quickly, and I loved it. And in fact, I love writing long form, so I moved from the magazine world into books quite quickly, because I would rather write 70,000 words on a subject than 70 or 700. I find it quite hard to narrow it down, because there's always so much to say, especially when you're investigating something in depth. And I always want to give all the background and all the facts and figures and justify what I'm doing to show that it is true, it's real, rather than just a little snippet of an opinion.
It's so interesting, isn't it? We say often on the show that the people you meet will change your life. And it seems, because I'd not heard that story before of the magazine and how it started. And that seems like that's laid the foundation for your entire career.
Yeah, I was really lucky, because when I started on that magazine, this is going back 35 years, because I'm a lot older than you might think. I could certainly be your mum's. I was working in an area that was just beginning. So back in those days, women's magazines were full of knitting patterns and talk about lipsticks and, how to cook your husband a lovely supper when he gets home from work. I mean, that was really the atmosphere. And when I started, there was, I think there was a medical editor who was a doctor, and the beauty department when we wrote about lipsticks and things, and then the fashion department, which was all about comfy elasticated waistskirts and knitting patterns and things like that. And then suddenly there were these new breed of wellness people, weird folk like nutritionists and aromatherapists and reflexologists and osteopaths and things that suddenly became known, and this whole world of complementary medicine appeared. And there was nobody really to cover it on the magazine, because that had never really happened before. Mm-hmm. And so because I was the newbie and didn't really have much of a brief, they said, oh, Liz, you go and find out about this stuff. There's somebody who wants to talk about omega-3s, whatever they are, and will you go and talk to these people? So I went along, and I was just hooked from day one. I was completely fascinated by the thought that we could change how we look and how we feel by what we put into our bodies. And I'd had a long struggle with eczema. It was a trait that I was born with. I spent a lot of my young teenage life using steroid creams and was always very self-conscious, would always wear long-sleeve clothes because I was aware of all these kind of scabby bits of skin on my arms. And I remember talking to a nutritionist who said, well, of course, you need good quality fats in your diet. You're missing your omega-3s. Where's your GLA? What are you eating? And I was like, well, I'm just eating, regular food. It's like, and I don't really pay much attention to what I was eating. And I changed my diet, and I started including many more beneficial fats. And this is back in the day when low fat was really being pushed. So we had people like Rosemary Connolly talking about the hip and thigh diet, which is let's strip all the fat out of our diets and we'll get really thin. Well, yes, up to a point that will happen. But what will also happen is your skin will fall apart because it'll become really dry and flaky and devitalized. And that's an outward sign of what's also going on inside, because we need good, healthy fats. We run on cholesterol and healthy fats that make our hormones, and they're the kind of the building blocks of good nutrition. So I changed my diet. I began to see real changes in how I felt. And again, that was another light bulb moment, that we can control so much of how we look and feel by the fuel that we eat. So I left the world of magazines and I wrote my first book, which was called Vital Oils. And it was written against this whole culture of low fat. And so I was very counter that and saying, no, we need fat. We need good quality fats. We obviously don't need the trans fats, the hydrogenated fats, these low-fat hydrogenated spreads, names I won't mention, but have got sort of pictures of yellow flowers on them. It's, it was very prevalent then that was the diet that was being pushed. And so I spent some time over in Harvard talking to some of the professors and the researchers over there, because of course this is all pre-internet. Okay, this is pre-Google. In fact, my kids have said to me not long ago, how did you write a book without the internet?
It's hard to imagine.
And I said, okay, so I used to do this thing called going and talking to people and actually interviewing the real academics, turning up and having time with them. And you just can't beat that. The University of Google does not provide you with all the answers. I would go and sit in the British Library and pull out research papers. And I'm quite old school, and I still am quite old school in that approach. And I don't trust what's online, and I always want to go back to the source and then not only look at what the source has said online, but actually talk to them, preferably ring them up or go and see them. But if not, at least have an email exchange. Because you need that authenticity. Very often you'll pick up a headline of a study, you then go and read the study and realise that actually that's not actually what the study said. And then you make contact with the author of the study who goes, yeah, and actually what we found after that was even more interesting. These right. were the findings led us. So you can't beat that old school journalism. So I'm very grateful for that as a background. And then I just went on and wrote more and more books because I loved it so much.
With that first book, how did that come about?
So I had got a little bit of a name, I guess, from writing for magazines. So I had a little bit of a track record. And I just went to see a publisher and I said, I think this is a really important area. Nobody's really writing about it. And will you give me a book contract? And I guess I was just a bit ballsy. And back in the day when you're young and you think that, well, of course you can do this. Of course I can write a book. and I guess it's that kind of courage and, I don't know, naivety of youth that just makes you think, well, yeah, I can do this. Just
so do you not have that confidence anymore?
I think I do, but I'm more aware of what can go wrong and the fact that there are an awful lot of people out there. So, why would you give it to me? I think I'm more, I think you just become more aware of everything and therefore more aware of all the things that can go wrong as well as all the things that can potentially go right.
I think what's interesting there is that everyone was doing the safe path of let me do dinners for husbands because that's what's selling. And then because you were the new person, it's like, okay, well, you go off and do this weird thing that we're not really sure what it is. And then that was actually what pushed your career forward.
Yeah. And when I look back now, that was 35 years ago. And then from there, I went into daytime TV, and then I started a beauty company, and then I did lots of other things. And now coming back, I now have my own magazine. I've now continued writing books. I now podcast about all these great things. And it's all about wellness. And I just consider myself so fortunate because I'm right in the heart of well-being, which is the biggest consumer industry. It's a $500 billion industry. I mean, it's just massive. And it has so many tentacles that spread everywhere and is perceived as something that's very new and fresh and forward-going. And yet I've got a heritage that goes back decades with strong foundations saying, listen, I've not just picked this up as a trend. This is something that it's in me. It's part of my DNA. It's what I do. It's what I run on. So I feel incredibly fortunate to be doing something that in a way I've always been doing, but is so new and fresh.
What does the term well-being mean to you?
I think it means feeling good, looking good, and doing some good. I think it is those three things combined. And that is the thread, the narrative that I try and run through everything. Feeling good in the sense of being well. We know that we're living longer. Our longevity is just increasing incrementally. I mean, it's extraordinary, exponentially, how our lifespan and we're solving so many things. You've got stem cell treatments for cancers, you've got treatments for previously incurable diseases. We're not dying of sepsis. We've not yet, anyway. Keep the superbugs away with our antibiotic use. But there are many, many more things in place that will keep us alive for longer. Our nutrition is far better. Our exercise routine tends to be better. So we are living longer, but there's no point in having years on our life unless we have the life in our years to enjoy it. Because at the same time, you've also got the rise of mental health issues, dementia, Alzheimer's, and we don't want to be in a position where we're losing our minds later on and our bodies are going, but our minds have crumbled. So for me, it's all about finding ways to live well for longer. That's certainly a strong thread in what I do. And also looking good. I come from a beauty background, and I think, looking good is all part of self-esteem. It's an outward reflection of how we may feel on the inside. I'm not obsessed about it. I don't think we should be striving for conventional beauty. I certainly never use the term anti-aging. I never have, even when I had a beauty company. Those words were banned. There's nothing wrong with aging. We want to be pro-aging. I mean, I want to be pro-aging. I mean, what's the alternative? If you're not aging, well, you're dying, so you're dead. So let's bring it on, aging. Let's all age really well. So it's not getting hung up about the depth of our wrinkles or anything like that, but it's about being healthy and being full of vitality and having that kind of glow that shines through everything you do. And then, of course, well-being in the bigger sense, well-being of the planet. How can we sustain our lives? How can we bring wellness to everyone? I spend a lot of time in East Africa and developing countries where, well-being is a true luxury, because for them it's survival. And I think we need to really balance what we're doing here with our introspective, should we be having the avocado on toast, with or without the truffle oil, and how do we then balance that with people who are just going to bed hungry and have so little. So it's about that, getting the right balance, I think, in every area of our life. And that's why well-being's so fascinating, because you can stretch it in any which way you choose. You can be very focused on food or fitness or exercise or medicine, or you can start applying it to the environment.
I think the key word there is balance. I was part of a panel recently and the whole theme was balance, and I was the only male in the room. So it was a all-female panel bar me, and everyone that turned up, bar one photographer, was female. So I was a little bit outnumbered, and I was sitting in the fifth seat of the panel, and there were 5 of us on the panel. So the moderator went through the panel and asked every single person how they dealt with balance and if they had a problem with balance. And overwhelmingly, all 4 said, I really struggle with balance, being a mother, a wife, an entrepreneur, all of these different things that they were doing. They said they really struggled with balance. And then it got to me, and I said, I don't really struggle with balance. And I got booed out of the room. And then I was like, no, let me finish. And I said, I wonder if this is perhaps a problem that is affecting women more than it's affecting men, in that you feel like you do have to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother. Everyone is looking at you, relying on you for all of these different things, and you have to look good while doing it. Yes. And for me, it's very much, there's one thing on my list, and then I do that thing, and then I move on to the next thing. And all of these women, these wonderful women on this panel, were like, I wish I had. My list is I'm multitasking at all times. Have you ever struggled with balance, and how do you wrestle with it?
That is a really interesting question, and you are absolutely spot on. And I don't know whether it's because women's brains are perhaps adapted in a way to have an ability to be more agile for multitasking, because there is definitely that goes on. You can be the CEO of the most amazing company, and work unbelievably long hours and incredibly hard, and it's still your fault if there's no milk in the fridge. When you get home, because but that's just what it is, and I think we're getting better at shifting it. I mean, I've got 3 boys. I have 5 children, 2 girls and 3 boys, and I try and bring my boys up to kind of co-share and take responsibility. And if they say, oh well, there's no milk, I go, oh well, better go and get some then, or did you not pick any up? Do you not think? I mean, that's just a tiny example, but it is hard, because women obviously get pregnant, give birth to the child. You're very involved in the maternal rearing of that, and that will always be the main part of family life if you have children. And then you have to then fit your work in around that, and then your relationships, and then you tend to be the caregivers. And very much, my generation is often the sandwich generation, because we're looking after the younger generation, but then we may be looking after elderly parents as well. So, and you're stuck in the middle, and where is the time for you? And then how do you balance everything else in? I think in terms of work, it's really important to absolutely love what you do if you can. because then that really helps with the balance. I don't feel out of balance because I genuinely am passionately so in love with what I'm doing that it doesn't seem like a struggle. I think things get out of balance when they're a struggle and difficult and you're not enjoying it. I think you become much more resilient and better able to cope with change and difficult times and get that balance right when you're enjoying it. It's not to say that things don't go wrong and they're not difficult. They are, but I think you're better able to cope if you truly love what you do.
We talk a lot at the moment. I think it's a topic that is trending at the moment is doing what you love. How do we be realistic about that? Because it is still work, right? It's not always going to be easy, and you have to love the hard things.
Yeah, how do you love the hard things? I think you don't love the hard things themselves, but I think you have a knowledge and appreciation of what getting through them will achieve. So I think the thing is to fix your eyes on the prize. Where are you going? What do you really want to be doing? What's your objective? Getting up and thinking, okay, what's the objective? What do I really need to achieve? How do I need to get there? Once you know what your objective is, then you can work out your path. Hopefully the path of least resistance to make it most straightforward to get to. But if you've got no idea what that objective is, then how are you ever going to kind of navigate your way through to it? So having a clear objective, I think, is really good. And it doesn't have to be necessarily work related. It could be some element of personal fitness or self-achievement or happiness or relationship or whatever it is, but you've got to have that really clear objective in order to be successful in making your way towards it.
What's your objective?
What's my objective? I have many. How long have you got? I think my objective, I was thinking about this because I was writing a piece for my magazine about 2020, and one of the questions that I'm always asked is, what are your New Year's resolutions? What are you giving up? And blah blah blah. And actually, I'm not very good about giving stuff up. I believe in adding stuff in. So I think that's much more positive than saying I'm not going to do this anymore. I think you switch it and say I am actively going to do this instead, or start doing the other. And I was actually listening to something that Melinda Gates had written, the Gates Foundation, obviously, mega wealthy, supremely capable, the world is her oyster. And she says that she chooses a word for each year, and that's her objective as to what she's going to try and achieve. And she's chosen various different things over the years. Grace, I think, was one, kindness was another. And I was thinking, okay, so if I was going to choose a word for my objective for 2020, what would it be? And actually, my word is joy. And I think we don't have enough joy around us. And I think we can make our own joy. We can look for joy in the little things and the big things. And we can give joy as well as seek it for ourselves. And, I've had a hard few years in lots of ways. And as I'm sure everybody listening has as well, life is not easy. And it's not all that lovely Instagram perfectness that we only show the good stuff. And I would like to get a bit more joy. And so joy out of work, to take the stress out a little bit, and joy at home, and just kind of generally lighten up a bit. I think I'm sometimes in danger of just being a little bit too heavy.
Having that word, it will change your year, because if you're always driving towards kindness, you're going to have a different year to if you're driving towards happiness, or if you're driving towards money, or whatever word you choose for the year will shape that year. It's really interesting.
I hope so. And I just, I'm just going to keep it in my mind that whatever I do, how is this spreading joy? How is this creating joy? Joy is such a positive word, has no negative connotations to it at all. I mean, and it can apply to everybody. And it's just putting a smile on somebody's face or on your own face. And, we know that even simple things like stretching our mouths into a smile, even a fake smile, even if we don't actually feel like it, pulling the corners of our mouths upwards and back, the physical trigger to our brain creates happy chemicals and endorphins in our brain. So even if you get up and the first thing you do is you look in the mirror and you give yourself a huge smile, It just might make you feel silly and make you smile because you're doing it, and you think
It's
that
funny,
just
like
looks
both of us
so
are grinning,
ridiculous.
yeah, as you said that.
But you are actually creating happy chemicals in the brain, which then links onto our immunity, which links to our mental health, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That happened to me this morning. So this morning I woke up and my girlfriend was having a bad day and she had a little cry, and I thought, so normally when I get in the shower I put music on, and so instead of putting what I normally put on, I put on a Disney playlist because I knew it would make her laugh and it would get out of bed. And we then sung Disney songs for the next half an hour. My mood walking to work was so much happier than if I'd just put my normal tunes on, because we'd just been silly and just sung bloody Kuna Matata around the house. It's just ridiculous.
I'm a great believer in just being silly. That's cool.
yeah, be more silly. So you talked there about the effect that just smiling will have on your brain, and obviously you've done a lot of research around neuroscience. And when you were initially sort of in the times where everyone was reporting that low-fat diets were the key, and you were saying you were going against the grain,
high fat. Mm-hmm.
were you getting a lot of resistance?
I did have some resistance, yes. I was nearly sued by a big multinational for daring to suggest that their hydrogenated low-fat trans fats in spreads could be damaging to health. And now, of course, they've all been removed and replaced. And it's like, what, trans fats? No, we would never use those. It's like, actually, you did, guys. And you told us they were really good for us, which is why we're so confused. So yeah, there were some slightly scary moments. But I think for me, I'm just a communicator. I don't do this research. I go and find the people who are the great brains and who are doing the research. And what I feel that my role is like a megaphone. I'm just an amplifier. And very often you'll find these extraordinary researchers whose life's work is, one particular metabolic pathway. I mean, they are just so forensic in their knowledge. And very often they are super keen to share it. And they are really delighted when somebody takes an interest and says, look, I'd love to know more about this, will you? But I'm not a scientist, so you're going to have to explain it to me really simply. You're going to have to use really basic language because, I didn't even get my maths O-level. I mean, I'm really not an academic. So as long as I can understand it, if you talk to me in such a way that I can understand it, I can then go and write it up and convey it to other people and hopefully, spread the message that you're working in your ivory towers and your great brains. And they're often not the best communicators. And yet I feel I'm the intermediary that then takes that information and then can pass it on in hopefully an accessible and in an interesting way. So in terms of being robust, I think that's a great benefit. So I love busting myths. There's a big one that I've been on recently, which is all about HRT and it's linked with breast cancer. And I've been busting that myth big time. And that's not me. That's not my research. That's talking to the eminent professors and the scientists who've been leading this globally and who aren't getting the oxygen of publicity to get the story and the message out there. And I can do that, and I can wave that flag, knowing that I've got this huge, backdrop of medical weight and authority behind me. It's not me. I'm relying on them to then come forward and say, no, this is totally right. What Liz has said and how she's explaining it is the truth.
So HRT being hormone replacement therapy, people are saying that causes breast cancer.
There was a study back in 2002, the Women's Health Initiative, and basically what happens is when you hit your 40s as a woman, your estrogen levels start to decline. So women are fueled by estrogen. It's the fuel in our tank. For guys, it's more testosterone. For women, it's more estrogen. And when our childbearing years are dwindling and coming to an end, so our estrogen supplies diminish. And the thing about estrogen is that it circulates around the entire body. So people tend to think of it as just something that's produced in the ovaries and it's very localized to the pelvis, but not a bit of it. We've got estrogen receptors in our brains, we have them in our bones, we have them in our ears, our eyes, everywhere. So when estrogen starts to decline, which happens generally around sort of early to mid-40s, as a woman, you can start to get all kinds of weird things happening. You might start to get headaches, really bad migraine type headaches. You might start to feel anxious or have low mood or instances of depression. And way, way too many women go to the GP with this, and they are wrongly prescribed antidepressants when they should be prescribed estrogen. Because if your low mood and anxiety is caused by low levels of estrogen, just numbing it with an antidepressant, that's not going to fix it. It's just going to make you feel numb, and you just frankly don't care that you're depressed. So topping up your estrogen is the only thing that will bring that mood back up if it's caused by low estrogen. Same with achy joints. A lot of women give up sport or exercise or fitness because their joints are aching, and they go off and see rheumatologists or think they've got arthritis or whatever. And actually it's because the estrogen is coming out of their bones. So this one study, so back in the day, lots of women used to take HRT. It was just like the normal thing. You'd go to your doctor and they go, yeah, mid-40s, there you go, you'll feel a load better, you'll start to sleep well and you'll feel better and you'll be fitter and better protected against heart disease and all these things. Then there was one study in 2002 which basically skewed data linking taking high levels of estrogen with an increased rate in breast cancer. And for many, many reasons, which I go into at length on Liz Earle Wellbeing, the data was wrong. And it used a much older demographic of women, often in their 70s, who were very overweight, who were smokers, all these risk factors for breast cancer. It was a nonsense. And also using the older style of HRT. In the old days, it used to be mostly oral through tablets. Now it's gels and patches, which is much, much safer. It doesn't go through the liver. It's not metabolized. So it's a really super safe way of taking it. And yet this study persists. It hit the media. Lovely, Daily Mail, good old Daily Mail headlines. You've got to love it, haven't you? HRT causes breast cancer. Immediately, there was this massive panic. And it was a perfect storm because it was at the beginning of the summer. All the academics who had been part of the study had broken up from their various universities. There was nobody available for a statement. These authors have since publicly apologised for the way that this was misreported. And so I've worked alongside many, many doctors and medics to try and get this message across, because GPs are not being trained. This is another big scandal. GPs will do, 7 to 9 years of medical school training. Any GPs out there or being trained, going through medical school, do tell me if I'm wrong in this, because according to my latest research, there is still no compulsory training on menopause. So they'll do maybe 3 months on obstetrics and gynecology. Not every woman's going to have a baby. Every woman will have a menopause. And as we get older, we're having to live longer and work longer through it. And we need to be better able to do that. So it's a real cost. It's a human cost, but it's also a cost to business and a cost to relationships and all sorts of things as to why we need to have a better understanding of hormone health for midlife women. So I've become a bit of a campaigner. I do love a nice campaign, actually. I've always had a campaign on the go over the years, whether it's food labelling or healthcare or high fats in your diet or whatever. I mean, organics and regenerative agriculture, lots and lots of different things I've campaigned for over the years. But this is something that has really stuck because there is a big health injustice happening with women, and it's costing women and society a fortune. And it just needs to be changed. And unfortunately, The Lancet went and reprinted a study that was, again, picked up in the media recently. So I've been quite busy going on lots of, TV shows and radio programmes, putting the counter the case and saying why this study was wrong. And actually, HRT is very protective. Protects against colon cancer, it protects against Alzheimer's, type 2 diabetes, osteoarthritis, osteoporosis, cuts your risk of coronary heart disease in half. Seriously,
Yeah.
Any guy who's connected to a woman, be it mother, grandmother, aunt, sister, colleague, friend, literally, if you see signs of changing in mood, anxiety, achy joints, headaches, just lack of sleep. Interesting story with Oprah Winfrey. I don't know why I said Winfrey, because there is only one Oprah. I mean, it's just a first name, isn't it, really, Oprah? She obviously has this massive TV show. She's mega influential, mega wealthy, has access to anybody in the world, doesn't she? I mean, who's not going to take a call from Oprah? And she started to get heart palpitations. So her heart would beat really fast. So she was in her mid-40s. So she spoke to all the cardiologists, went to see everybody. I mean, literally the top, Harvard, Stanford guys specialising in heart conditions, had all these checks, ECGs, whatever. Clear, nothing. Couldn't find anything wrong. And it was only when she had a woman on her show who started talking about menopause and symptoms and saying, well, of course, one of the symptoms is a racing heartbeat, a vasomotor symptom. And Oprah said, hold on a minute. What do you mean racing heartbeat and menopause? And she said, yeah, as your estrogen declines, you'll start to get, heart palpitations. So she, of course, then immediately went down the drains looking at all the research and started taking HRT. She, her life was turned around. She felt totally transformed and rejuvenated, and she's become also quite a crusader for it. But it's so, if you know of people who just have all kinds of different symptoms. I used to get tinnitus in my 40s in my ears, and was really concerned that I was going to have to live with this condition. It's a horrid thing. If you know somebody who's got it, it's dreadful. You can't escape it. Morning, noon, and night. It's just there with you. Since taking HRT, it's gone. Why? Because we have estrogen receptors in our inner ear, and of course they go out of balance if they're lacking in the estrogen. So there's just so many things. I could do a whole podcast. Well, I have done many podcasts just on HRT, so I'll stop boring you. I'll shut up about that now.
No, it's fascinating. Thank you for answering that. Is print dead?
Love that question. Everyone said print was dead. And when I started my magazine, we started it online. We started it, it'll be 4 years ago, just now. And I thought, like everybody, let's not bother with print. We'll go straight into online. Everyone can download it. Everyone's got a phone or an iPad or whatever. So that's where we started. And when we got to our kind of second edition, we were just getting a lot of calls and emails and questions from people saying, love your magazine, Liz, but could we please have it in print? And there's something about, you don't curl up on the sofa with an iPad, do you, and just sort of scroll through it. There's a tangibility to it. And for me, my background as a journalist is in print. And I love being able to pick up and flick through something that is real. And I think there's an important point here. I'll come back to your question about whether it's dead or not. But I think as a source of credible information, we have to be really careful when we print stuff because it has to be accurate. We mustn't libel anybody. It can't be inaccurate because once this thing has gone to print, that's it. It's out there. I can't nip online, go into back of house and change it because I've suddenly realised, oops, got that wrong. Never mind, quick, tap, tap, tap. It's changed, never mind, no harm done. And that's why, writing a book, and I've written a lot of books, when I give my manuscript into a publisher, the first thing they do is they get it legaled. Because they don't want to get sued either, that they're printing something that's defamatory or untrue. So there is a real credibility and authority to print that you don't get with online. I did an interview for a very reputable Sunday newspaper, who shall remain nameless, recently, and they should have known better. And we trusted them because they've got it was a good journalist, it was a good reputation. Interview came out in print and online, and there were two major errors, which was very upsetting for me, because people read it and they think it's true, and it wasn't true. And when we confronted them on it, they were just so laid back. It was like, oh, don't worry, we'll just hop online and change it. So it's almost as if the journalists now are having to rush so quickly to keep up because the pace has got so fast. There isn't the time for fact-checking. There isn't the time often to go back to the source and to just check really whether this is absolutely right. And there's also that knowledge in the back of your mind that, do you know what? If it's not true, it doesn't really matter because we can hop on and change it. If somebody calls us out on it, we'll just change it. So I always say to my team, particularly when they're researching stuff, if you can, find the printed source because it's likely to be so much more accurate. So that's the first thing about why I love print and why I think people should trust it. But interestingly, consumer magazines are struggling. We're now published by Hearst, so we see a lot of their data. And yeah, if you look at the industry as a whole, consumer magazines are down. However, there are a few significant exclusions, and I'm pleased to say that our magazine is doing well. We're 35% up year on year, which is, real bucking the trend. If you are a niche magazine, and if you are producing something that's high quality that you can't get anywhere else, you will do well. So, for example, one of the most popular titles at Hearst at the moment is Runner's World. Because if you're a runner, you're going to buy Runner's World. You're going to want to know what's going on in the world of running, and you're going to want to sit down on the sofa or whatever and flick through something that you are tuned into. And I think the same is true of us. If you want something that is beautiful and inspirational, that looks lovely, it's a bit of me time, isn't it? It's an inexpensive treat. In the scheme of things, it doesn't cost that much. It's the same price as a couple of cappuccinos, and you've got it there for at least a month or two to use and to flick through and enjoy. And it's just that little bit of escapism, which I don't think you get through digital. I mean, I think digital is great. I think having your online mag as well is great because you've got that as an option in your pocket always to refer to, but you can't beat that tangibility of print. So no, I don't think it's dead. I think it's being re-engineered and refocused, and I think the magazines that are struggling are the ones that focus on things like news and gossip, because how can you stay current when you've got all, you've got everything?
Media,
It's just, I feel sorry for the fashion industry because, the minute they put out a fashion show, it's like, it can be copied in China in the next, 3 or 4 hours and be out there. And I was talking to a friend who's a news journalist, and they're saying the problem now for the news journalists is you've got, people like Trump tweeting from the closed meetings about what's going on. So whereas before you would wait as a journalist until all these guys come out of their big powwows, and then there'd be the media briefing, and then the journalists would go away and write about it, they're not even being given that opportunity now, because the news is being made by the guys in the meeting before they've even stepped foot outside and confronted the microphones.
Nutty.
Isn't it? So they're creating the news. They are the news, but they're also creating it.
Yeah. Which is a bit of a tricky situation. Yeah. So I suppose you're a media company now, really.
Oh my goodness, that sounds really grand, doesn't it?
And it's what it is.
What I love about disruptive technology, and you guys know this, far better than me, is when I started in media, and I went into daytime television quite early on in my career when it first started back in the day, and we were just at the mercy of the programme schedulers and the controllers. And I managed to get a daytime TV show of my own in the afternoon called Liz Earle's Lifestyle, which was like a kind of well-being Big Brother that was filmed in my home in Putney. It was mad. And again, that was something that was commissioned by the ITV network controllers. So, I had to go cap in hand and talk to them and persuade them to do it. Now I've got a YouTube channel. So it's like, great, you want to watch me at home? You want to see what we're doing? Click on. I'd love to do more radio. I love the spoken word. And partly because I can sit there in my pajamas. And although you guys are filming, that's not fair, is it? But, a lot of radio, again, you're at the mercy of the commissioning editors and the controllers and the schedulers. I podcast like you guys, and I love it, that the fact that we can make our own programs and we can speak directly to those who want to listen to us. So I love the fact that yes, I think many of us can be our own media companies. I mean, I happen to have a magazine as well, but yes, I think being back in the media and having a voice, what a thrill, what a joy, to use that lovely word.
It's so crazy to me that pirate radio was even a thing, that we were just broadcasting and that was deemed, we were shut down and people were, prosecuted and chased, and it got really, really dark for certain people who were having pirate radio stations.
You're so right, just for having a voice on the airwaves, which now we all have. Everybody who's got a smartphone in their pocket can have a voice.
It's insane. Thank goodness where we are. So have you, we obviously are so thrilled with the podcast format. Like, we just want to talk about it all the time. So how have you found your podcast journey?
Yeah, it's interesting. I came to it slightly reluctantly. I was actually led to it by my millennial team.
So you've got a mix of
Yeah,
those in
so
your team?
my team tends to be quite split. I've got older people like me in their kind of 50s who've been around a block and have got some experience and some wisdom, perhaps. And then a load of lovely 20-somethings who are just, so creative and so energized and so on it and bringing all these new ideas to the fore. It's a great mix, actually, that intergenerational mix. I love the way it plays up and down with the share of knowledge. And so a few years ago, it was my food and travel editor, Emma, said to me, you really should be doing a podcast. I said, what's a pod thing? And she said, well, it's like a radio show. And I said, okay. Not really sure about that, but okay, if you think it's a good thing, then I'll give it a go. And my daughter Lily was working with me as my digital editor, and she was saying, "Yep, come on, we can do this, we can record it." So we recorded a few, and we had no idea that it would just really, really take off. I mean, we've had 1 million downloads. It's extraordinary, and that's really without pushing it. To be honest, it was just like this little sideline. And I realised very quickly that I love it, because it's all about content. And I think all of us are slightly over the kind of Instagram vlogger, let's have a look here in my bedroom and unpack this box of stuff and talk about it without any knowledge. The thing about a podcast is that you have to have something to say. I mean, it sounds really obvious, but it is about content. If someone's going to give you the opportunity to talk to them in their ears, I mean, what a privileged position. So let's make the most of it. Let's make sure that what you're saying is actually worthy of that time, that precious bit of time that they're giving up. So that's the first thing. So it's all about content, what you say and how you say it. So, here you've got great equipment. It's all very carefully done. You've got your sound blankets up. It's a very considered thing. It's not just, sitting in your bedroom with a phone. You need to make sure there's good production values and having interesting people, hopefully talking about interesting things. So for me, it's become a bit of a newly acquired passion. And we are doing more. So I have this series called Wellness with Liz Earle, and that's where I normally talk to an expert for about 40 minutes or so. Great guy we had on recently, a neuroscientist called Dr. Simon Dial, talking about brain fats. You've got to listen to this. Yeah, it's really, really good. It's all about the role of DHA in our brains, how important it is from babyhood to old age, and where we get these fats from and how they're used in the body. I mean, honestly, seriously, anybody who has a brain needs to listen to that episode. Then Lily said to me, because we do those in blocks of series of about 10 or so, and then she said, you should do a little snippety thing that's just you. So why don't you just pick kind of like 5 things and do it on a Friday, have it as the Friday 5, a little roundup of the week. So that's now what I do. I normally record that on my own in my bedroom with a nice bit of kit. But, it is just me talking for about 10 minutes about things that have caught my eye or grabbed me or a bit controversial, or it gives me a chance to stand on my proverbial soapbox and shout about stuff that isn't right. And actually that has had even higher ratings than our longer form podcast, which was a big surprise.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing now is in the new year, we're putting a bit more money into the podcast, and we're going to rebrand it as the Liz Earle Wellbeing Show. And we're moving to slightly bigger studios, and we are going to film it.
Amazing.
I'm going to be taking notes about your amazing setup here. So it's incredible to me that people actually listen to their podcast on YouTube so that they can
don't understand.
Watch it. You do that, Adam.
I don't really use the podcast app. I will always have
You'd like to watch
visual,
and see. I mean, it's nice, I guess, to see the person who's talking.
So for me, because I generally listen to stuff when I first get up in the morning. So I'll be doing other things as that's happening. So I'll play it on the TV or something, and so the video will be there, and I'll be kind of watching it for a bit, then I'll go and make some coffee and I'll be doing some work. So I'll half listen to it, half watch it, but I like to have that thing to look at. I think even when I've got audiobooks, I don't know if it's because I'm dyslexic or just the way that I process things, but I would like to have something to look at. So even when I'm with an audiobook, if I just sit there and there's nothing going on and I close my eyes, I'm like, I can't cope with this. I need something.
That visual stimulation.
Yeah.
And I guess it is all about authenticity as well, because you can really see, what that person is like. You can look them in the eye. Do they look shifty? Do I look, do I trust them? I guess for me, I was trying to get away from the pressures, particularly as a woman, of, what does she look like? Let's put some makeup on. I've just kind of scraped my hair back today. Is that actually going to look okay? What am I wearing? It's just another pressure that takes you away from actually what should be the focus, which is the content, and actually what you're saying and how you're saying it.
I used to think like that when I'd started recording them of like, I better make sure I'm wearing something nice and stuff. I just don't bother anymore, because I have realised that actually no one cares, and it is just about the content. And you could be...
You say no one cares, but as a midlife woman working in wellbeing, there'll be a screen grab that will end up on the Daily Mail, sidebar of shame online, going, oh, look how she's let herself go, and talk about well-being, she looks like an old bag. And so there is that added pressure always, unfortunately.
It's awful. I mean, maybe as a guy I just don't feel that, but I just feel...
Also, no one's putting us in the Daily Mail.
Yeah, and I suppose our thing isn't...
Hopefully it'll be shut down by so.
That's never going to be shut down, is it? But I suppose because our content isn't about well-being or beauty or anything like that, no one's watching it for how beautiful me and Adam are. And I mean,
you are beauty. They should be tuning in just to swoon.
You are very open to sort of mentoring young entrepreneurs. What do you find is kind of their major hang-ups? What is it that most people, their problems that they're coming to you with?
So many. I think a lot of people have really good ideas, but it's then how do you translate that idea into the reality? I think getting access to good information is a lot easier than it has been. I mean, when I started my various different brands back in the day, we didn't have such a thing as mentoring. I mean, we didn't even use the word entrepreneur. I mean, that's a relatively recent word, to be honest. We didn't talk about brand founders or brand building. You were just a business person. Actually, you were usually a businessman. And look, there are some girls over there wanting to do it. So it was a very different landscape. So I think, my advice is always to go out and get as much help as you can. I was with a great accelerator academy last night, actually, called Resurgo, and they are looking at sustainable businesses and amplifying sustainability and social impact businesses that are doing some good. And I think that's really key. You've got to have that as part of your brief, because I think people want to invest time and money, whether as an investor or as a consumer or buyer of your product, in a brand that they believe is making a tangible difference somewhere along the line. Because there's so much choice out there, why wouldn't you want to go with the guys who are making a better difference? So I think that's really key. But I think ultimately, you've got to be so beyond passionate about what you do, because it's tough. It's really hard. And if it goes well, it will consume you night and day. You'll be working 24/7. It may well be financially incredibly draining. You may be mortgaging your house or, giving up all sorts of other things to fund what you believe in. It's the thing that you've got to be so passionate about that, on that wet Wednesday morning when you've got to get up at 3:30 to catch that early train or that plane for that meeting or whatever, you don't mind doing it because you know that it's for the greater good and it's building something really, really important. And you need to have that passion that will give you that resilience when things get really tough later on, because they will do. Everything goes up and down. There are always problems. There's always unexpected items that will be in your bagging area that you'll need to deal with. So passionate. It's not enough just to say, do you know, I quite fancy doing this. Anybody says that's like a red flag. It's like, no. Step away from this idea now, because it's really, you are just going to be doomed to failure. You have to be somebody who says, I cannot not do this. I am so beyond driven to do this. It's making such a difference to me, to my customers, to my team. I have to do it, and I will do it at any price almost.
Amazing.
I guess you feel like that about your work too, yes?
Oh, completely, yeah.
Yeah. No, and it is crazy that it's 9 years on and that you still feel the same. and we had this conversation last night, the fact that the rest of the day today, we're going to be putting together a talk that we're giving tomorrow on the weekend. And we were just talking about how we're still doing, 9 years ago, it was suitcases full of paint on the train off to middle of nowhere to paint an ice cream van or something just crazy random, all of these weird things that we've done. And now that the speaking and all of that sort of stuff is starting to take off, it's going off to Adam's old university, which is going to be weird for him being back there, and delivering we've gone from our comfort zone, which is delivering a 45-minute talk, to now we're there all day, with just a bunch of students, just teaching them all of this stuff. And it's a real leap for us, but it's the same drive, it's the same determination. And
beans and noodles, we call it, because that's when we beans and noodles, because when we started we had nothing, no money, it was just that drive, and we were living on beans and noodles. So it's like that's what our beans and noodles is now. Just it doesn't ever go.
It's good, and it needs to. You need to keep that passion, that fire.
It's fun.
That is what sustains you, and it is fun.
Yeah, I mentioned we've been talking to an adventurer recently, and he talked about the two types of fun: type 1 fun and type 2 fun. And type 1 fun is your obvious roller coaster, and type 2 fun is the stuff that doesn't feel fun in the moment, is only fun in retrospect when you look back on it. And it's so funny how I crave the days of when it was awful, like we had no money and we were in this cold little garage, because it was so fun and we had this thing that we were building towards, and we were in amongst it. And it's really nice being back there again with the podcast and all of this newness that's coming up, of like building something else new from
very
the ground.
real. There is something about that. I absolutely feel that, having obviously co-founded a beauty company that became so huge, and with hundreds and hundreds of people, and kind of global ambitions and all of this, to then going back into startup mode.
Because you sold the company. And
now, that was sold back in 2010.
And in theory, you could be on a beach somewhere.
Sitting under a tree. Yeah, totally. Yeah, with a pina colada. And
what is it that makes you not go and do that?
To go back to beans and noodles.
I just think I am very driven and I'm passionate about it. And I do genuinely believe that there are important messages to get out there. And I think that we can make small changes to the way we live that make a big difference into how we feel, to mental health, to well-being. I guess, I don't know whether it's because I'm a mum, I've got 5 kids, I'm passing on those messages to them. I just feel that there are important messages to get out there. I'm passionate about social justice, and there is a lot of injustice out there. And I think there's a lot of scaremongering and mythology and misleading information. There's a lot of greenwashing. I see that in healthcare, in environment, in food labelling, in agriculture, all these things. And I think if I can be a totally impartial, unbiased voice, that all I'm interested in is evidence-based information. That is bottom line. That's what it's about. You cannot bribe me. I do not need your cash. I don't have a very lavish lifestyle. I sold my beauty company. It's great. I can fund the magazine, I can run my charity, I can do other things. I was talking to one of my team the other day, and there was this particular brand that I don't like for various ethical reasons. And she said, so what happens? They come in with 100 grand's worth of sponsorship. Do we take it? And I said, of course we don't take it. It's just like, you cannot buy your way in here. We will feature brands and amplify them if we think that they're great and they're good partners and they're doing the right thing and it's what they're saying is valuable or useful. And that's a very unusual position to be in. I don't know of any other publication that would turn down a sum like that from somebody just because they didn't think that ethically they were behaving in the right way. But we have that ability to do that. So that's, I really value that, and I think it's important and it's useful, and hopefully it will continue to grow and be valued by others too.
I think we have the same thing, and it's a duty of care to your audience.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it.
I won't say any more then. This was amazing. I haven't got to half of the things on my notes, so maybe we'll do a part 2 at some point. But this has been so fun. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me chat.
Where can people find you online?
I'm lizearlewellbeing.com. So that's the website. I love Instagram because it's just nice, friendly, warm people. I find Twitter a bit shouty and scary. But you'll find me at Liz Earle Me if you want to connect with me.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.